I have now finished Metal Gear Solid 1 through 4, and I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with the series. Despite fighting through the struggles of emulating the fourth game, I found it to be the most compelling gameplay in the series. Now, this isn't to say that the gameplay was the best, in the series to me at least. In fact, I would say that because the gameplay feels like only 20% of your total playtime is spent actually playing the game, that it might be only in front of Metal Gear Solid 1 for me in terms of gameplay. But the position that the game places Snake in was so unexpected to me after playing through the first three that I genuinely feel like there isn't an experience quite like it available anywhere else. What I'm talking about exactly is the battlefield stealth. Specifically, the first three acts, which see Snake deploying to active war zones where multiple factions are engaged in conflicts almost entirely separate from you and your objectives. Now, I will say that games like Splinter Cell, Hitman, Sniper Elite, or even some of the old Battlefield campaigns do have sections that I feel like probably come close to that kind of chaotic stealth amidst the battlefield that I'm talking about here, but the distinction is that I feel like no other game captures that feeling and gameplay whilst truly making you a third party to the violence. Metal Gear Solid 4 feels special because in these moments, it really captures the idea that the fog of war is an entity itself, causing chaos and destruction that is both encapsulating you and entirely separate from you. And this gameplay element is carried through multiple sections of the game as a core element. So I first want to describe why I feel like the narrative direction to actually portray Snake within a war was so great, and then how the gameplay complements this premise to create an experience that feels wholly unique. And take what I say with a grain of salt, since my experience with the series is limited, and I by no means have a thorough or long-standing understanding of the story. These are my thoughts after experiencing the games for the first time. And if I missed another game that offers this same concept, and I just completely left out that list I mentioned earlier, please let me know, because I absolutely would love to play more like this. So the story of Metal Gear Solid to me so far has been one giant anti-war message. The concept that technology is something that is being utilized by humans to create weapons of mass destruction that are mass-produced is an inherently negative thing that not only impacts the people who are directly involved, these soldiers and politicians who are taking direct actions and movements within these conflicts, but also the rest of the world that is existing under the world that these individuals are building. I also think that a certain component of the story is about how secret organizations or goals of a very small group of powerful individuals can ultimately lead to a culture, society, or movement that is inherently negative for the greater world, but that because these small groups of people have so much influence on these very high-profile decisions, it's not really in the hands of the greater community to determine their path forward, but rather they're at the whim of systems that are entirely misunderstood by them and outside of their control. I think that this concept is what generally led to how powerful Metal Gear Solid 2 was for me and is for a lot of people, I assume, specifically the messaging around how powerful elite individuals want to control the narrative that is being told to the world to influence people's decisions so that they have a place that is most beneficial for them. Now, I feel like the story centers around these super soldiers like Solid and Liquid and Big Boss and The Boss and these folks because they're at the cutting edge of these moments that are creating the larger impact on the world. But they're also a commentary on what we have all decided should be the mainstay components of a hero within our media, and maybe some of the downsides of choosing to glorify people who spend their lives involved with violence, especially the over-the-top action movie violence that I feel like inspired so many of the amazing cutscenes that they put together for all these games. for this reason, I think that the moment of finding the humanity within these over-the-top action heroes is something that the story has sought throughout all the games. In the first game, we see Snake infiltrating Shadow Moses as a top-secret spy-type individual, and then being, asked the question of whether or not love can bloom on a battlefield. This is representative of the change in war over time, that after the end of World War II, most modern militaries moved more towards special forces, small missions, and intelligence operations being the key points determining countries' strategic overall decision-making. That as time progresses and technology gets better, we've moved away from standing in a line and shooting at each other or running at each other with swords and shields, to now we have very advanced elite units of individuals who are highly trained, conducting very complex tasks in small units on scales that are not global wars that are going to result in millions of lives lost, but rather very small, individualized operations with express goals to gather intelligence or eliminate a threat. And I feel like Snake is representative of the change of war itself, how conflict over time has gone from a large-scale thing to a small thing, because as our perception and availability of information about war has evolved, we've recognized as a global community the negative attributes of those conflicts, given how powerful our weapons are now. And so the natural evolution of that is to move to people like Solid Snake or SEAL Team 6 or GRU or Spetsnaz, these people who are very advanced and taking on smaller conflicts with less loss of life involved. And throughout this all, both Snake and Big Boss kind of identify themselves as soldiers. The boss, when talking about the Cobra unit in Metal Gear Solid 3, is assigning the names to these members based off the emotions that they carry into battle. But despite this, we're not seeing soldiering, really. We're seeing tactical individuals inserted into infiltration missions. This is not a battlefield. This is not a platoon of soldiers or Marines attacking a fortified base or an enemy that knows that they're coming. These are specialized operations. And despite all of this, all of these characters who are engaging in this entirely separate realm of war still identify themselves and connect with the emotions and concept of being a soldier. This is why I feel like the intro of Metal Gear Solid 4 is so powerful, and the gameplay that follows, the battlefield stealth, because despite being told that these are soldiers, that these are people engaging in wars throughout the whole series, we have never actually been on a battlefield. The battlefield is filled with chaos and multiple parties engaging in conflict directly, not a base with guards that were sneaking by, but a actual no-shit battlefield that is evolving and changing moment to moment amidst the fog of war. This also creates a level of irony when we see the game open with Snake saying that war has changed, because Snake himself not only represents the exact way that war changed in a post-World War II environment, but that maybe the change of war for him is his introduction into these battlefields that are entirely separate from the advanced special forces stealth missions he was engaging in. Now, I do know that he was, I believe, a Green Beret before that and had obviously existed in war and was a veteran, but I think more conceptually is that he is what we've experienced in the game thus far, which has been somewhat disconnected from, what I would normally consider to be active, standard soldiering. So I think that's the thing that was carrying weight for me leading up to the moments of gameplay that were unexpected. This idea that war has changed, Snake is now going from this infiltrator to a soldier on a battlefield. He's even riding in on armored personnel carriers as opposed to these tactical, individualized insertions that we see in the other game. And what blew me away was the next moment, where now not only are we in the battlefield and we're seeing that Snake is taking different measures to enter into these conflicts and affect whatever his mission is. But now we're going to get to experience that conflict with multiple separate components engaged with each other. The first act sees you deployed to the Middle East amidst two PMCs that are actively engaged in an urban battle. To complicate this further, there are Gecko robots who, while aligned with one faction, seem pretty chaotic and ruthless in their destruction. As long as their goal of killing the enemy is achieved, it almost feels like they don't care about the collateral damage to their own units that they're doing. And there's Snake. You're navigating these living war zones as an outsider almost. You're sneaking through the cracks and manipulating or avoiding both sides so that you can reach your objective that, once again, is entirely separate from everybody else on this battlefield. These maps that you move through aren't the stable environments of the first three games. They're chaotic, shifting combat zones with explosions and soldiers advancing and civilians caught up in between, and you're threading the needle through it all silently. This battlefield feels alive and not a static backdrop through which you're trying to advance. The second act sees you dropping into South America, where a PMC is now assaulting a fortified military base and infrastructure. Snake can even aid the people who are assaulting the base and to use the implements that are left behind by both sides, like mortars or machine guns, or the actual tools that they're bringing in to open up gates or bust down doors to affect his decision-making and how he reaches his goal. Your interaction with these systems that feel like they're occurring entirely separate from what you're doing create a battlefield that isn't just noise, but like a system that you can interact with while remaining stealthy. The third act sees you dropped into an Eastern European city, donning the outfit of a private eye and stealthily following one man through a city that has been locked down for the night. At first, this feels like a subversion of what the first two acts were trying to express to you. That you went from the chaos of battlefields to a more quiet, stealth-based follow mission. But then you realize that this is guerrilla warfare, that the city is on a full military lockdown, that the guy that you're tailing is going to be picked up, stopped, or harassed by military troops on his way to his secret meeting place. That while this seems more quiet and less chaotic, this is actually just a separate type of warfare, a quiet battlefield that is simultaneously in constant conflict while trying to uphold the facade of a city that's still operating as though this overtaking force is not there. And while you go through these locations, Snake slowly succumbs to the stressors of the battlefield itself. Your stress bar below your health bar will go down when you're in an alert status for too long or engaged in direct conflict for any amount of time. Snake even ends up relying on a drug that he injects into his neck to overcome these effects, along with, some other stuff there that has to do with the guns of the Patriots and the nanomachines in his body. But symbolically, I feel like this is representative of the years of trauma, the post-traumatic stress that he most definitely is experiencing from years of violence and conflict are catching up to him. That he isn't just old on the outside, but that his mind is old and rich and wealthy with experiences that aren't necessarily positive for a person. And that he, just like all the other soldiers on the battlefield, despite the fact that they might not be feeling the stress in this moment thanks to their nanomachines altering the chemicals that are being dumped into their bodies, are experiencing traumatic events. And as Snake is going through this game and experiencing the horrors of a modern battlefield, he too is succumbing to some of the issues that come along with that. And obviously, this is all punctuated by the heroic finale of the game, where the fourth act sees you going back to Shadow Moses and even piloting a Metal Gear, which is such a oh my God, I'm going to have to talk about that in a different video because it was just so amazing to experience. And I can't believe in one of my Metal Gear videos, I had said something about how cool would it be to see Shadow Moses redone and modernized, and I just had no concept that that literally was in Metal Gear Solid 4. And then, you know, obviously with Act 5, seeing you kind of have these multiple cutscene moments where you're pushing forward through all this insane adversity while the chaos of multiple separate battles going on with Maylene on the boat or Meryl with Poop Guy, you know, doing the fight while you're trying to get through the microwave hallway. These are all moments that provide so much additional value to the beginning of the game. But that battlefield stealth is just so interesting as something that I didn't expect to see, but also very engaging and fun to experience from a gameplay side of things. Overall, I just feel that Metal Gear Solid 4 stands apart for making this stealth gameplay that functions inside of an actual battlefield, rather than treating battles as cutscenes or backdrops or stories that soldiers or enemies are telling you about in the past games. This design ties into Snake's role, and while other games touch on this idea, I just feel like, for me, in the games that I've played, Metal Gear Solid 4 is a one-of-a-kind experience in how it merges the chaos of war with its intricate stealth. I appreciate you watching the video if you have made it this far, and please consider leaving a comment to let me know your thoughts on Metal Gear Solid 4 and tell me everything that I missed or was wrong about, because I know there are a ton of super knowledgeable Metal Gear fans who have been leaving very insightful and thoughtful comments on the other videos, and I'd love to hear some of your insight here. All right, everybody, have a good one.